Indians are visiting hospitals in higher numbers than at any time in the past and visiting them more often. What's good for our health, though, isn't necessarily good for our wallets, with healthcare costs rising exponentially. How do we guard ourselves against exorbitant medical expenses but still make health and wellness a priority? The Modi government's push for the National Health Protection Scheme, which provides a family cover of 5 lakh rupees for 10 crore poor and vulnerable families, is being seen as one proactive measure. But in the absence of greater detail about how this will roll out, larger questions remain. Is health insurance a must for everyone? If you have corporate insurance, do you still need personal health insurance? Do doctors approach patients differently when they have insurance? We're going to try and get an answer to all of those questions and much, much more over the course of the next hour. Well, joining me on this panel today, we have Anurag Rastogi, member of the executive management of HDFC ERGO General Insurance Company Limited. Daljit Singh, President of Fortis Healthcare, is also with us today. Nishchay Suri, Partner and Head of KPMG Advisory, with us, as is Surya Bhatia, Certified Financial Planner and Principal Consultant of Asset Managers. Anurag Rastogi, let me begin with you. You know, there are many people who will say, I have a gym membership, I have a yoga instructor, I do all these things, other expenditure to keep myself healthy and fit. Do I necessarily need medical insurance? Now, what would you say to somebody like that?
Ankita very rightly pointed out, I think these two things are very, very different. Being healthy and doing everything to keep yourself healthy is absolutely important for all of us. But in spite of doing all those things, we do fall sick. I mean, and this is something that you cannot avoid, whatever healthy way of life you follow. Mm-hmm. And so health insurance provides you, funding or the financial help in those times when you have to shell out a huge amount of money in medical expenses. And so it helps you to balance your financial management. It helps you provide that necessary funding when you need it most. And as you rightly pointed out in your opening statement, the healthcare costs are really increasing very fast. The healthcare inflation is fairly high when we look at it in terms of insurance claim payouts. So I think health insurance has become a necessity, and the way the penetration is increasing the country, although it is still scratching only the surface, but the awareness is growing and people are buying.
Well, that's an important point you raise. Why is it that health insurance penetration is as low as it is even now, given rising medical care costs? Daljit Singh, if you would want to respond to that.
The health insurance is low because people, unfortunately, in our country, bulk of the people, do not have the means to afford a policy. Point number two, that many of them who live especially in up-country locations, villages, very small towns, even if they have the ability to buy an insurance, they have no place to go to. So Indian healthcare is actually plagued by 3 major problems. Mm-hmm. First is affordability that Anurag just spoke about. Second is accessibility, that is there a medical center close to where I live?
Right.
That provides me the care. And third is reliability, which is all about quality and the right conduct, etc. So whilst you may have one part of it, the other two are missing. And for healthcare to be delivered in a sensible manner, we do require the entire supply chain to be in place in a pretty robust pipeline.
Absolutely. But, to come back to, that of course, goes into a far larger debate and possibly something that we do need to discuss. But to come back to urban centers and private healthcare, Surya, as somebody who sort of, you talk to a great deal of a large number of clients, particularly about insurance. At what point would you actually advise someone to go in for health insurance? Is there a particular age? Is there a particular time of life at which it becomes imperative to have health insurance?
Actually, on the contrary, there is no time frame when you want to look at a health insurance. I think everyone needs to have a health insurance. Mm-hmm. The misconception which kind of is prevalent for the large population of India who actually has a health insurance are typically your corporate employees.
Right.
And they believe that because my insurance is coming from my corporate entity, my employer is giving me an insurance, hence why do I go and have a need of having a separate insurance for myself?
Right.
But that's actually totally incorrect. I need to have a separate health insurance policy for myself over and above what my corporate employer is giving me. Because what happens tomorrow if you want to leave your job, the company does not allow you a portability, you want to take a sabbatical, you don't have a job, the company just folds up. That's today's time and age. Where do you go? And when you are healthy, the health insurance companies are keen on you to have as you as a customer. The problem is, when I turn old or I'm unhealthy, then no one wants me. It does not make business sense for them at all. So it's good to get married with the health insurance company at a young age so that you can actually run through it, and there is no concept that I will not have that policy in the near future.
Okay, I think there are lots of issues that you raise over there, and I want to take those up one by one. Since you raised the subject of corporate insurance, yes, a few people certainly have the benefits of corporate insurance. Nishya Suri, I mean, explain this to us from the point of view of both the individual and the corporate. Companies obviously want a productive, healthy workforce, and look at corporate insurance as a way of delivering that. Is that necessarily, from the employee's point of view, the only insurance they should have? Explain to us that conundrum from both sides, if you will.
Well, to begin with, I guess every corporate organization is looking for a healthy workforce. I mean, the biggest asset for an organization are its people, and the people need to be productive. For that, they need to be well, spiritually well, financially well, emotionally well, physically well. Okay, so wellness isn't limited only to physical health. It's about your emotional well-being as well as financial well-being. So people that don't earn well in an organization are equally stressed and unproductive. So that's one dimension, clearly, that there is a linkage between wellness and productivity, and that's in the interest of an organization. As far as people are concerned, and given all the points made around rising costs related with medical and health considerations, clearly, people also want to join an organization where they're given adequate cover, not only for themselves, but for their spouse, for their dependent parents, for their dependent children. They want to ensure that in times of need, there is the organization that will come forth and support them.
Anurag Rastogi, what about the individual themselves? Can they rely on just having employer-based insurance or a corporate or group insurance, or, as Surya pointed out, do your personal needs not necessarily always get covered by that? Do you also have to think about portability, job loss, all of those issues when you're looking at insurance?
Yeah, actually Surya brought some very, very important points on the corporate insurance. And this corporate insurance is not an Indian phenomena. World over, either by the government mandate or because of this, a corporate's willingness to have a healthy workforce, they provide health insurance. But look at the health insurance. When I look at the health insurance corporate data, most people I'll see will be covered anywhere between 1 lakh rupees to 3 lakh rupees. And look at the Modi Care, look at the National Health Protection Scheme, where for people who are in the vulnerable section, the company is talking about a 5 lakh cover. So is the corporate cover sufficient? I do not think so. 3 lakh rupees with the kind of healthcare expenses that you have today, 3 lakh rupees for the entire family is hardly a sufficient cover, number one. Number two, many of these corporate covers will come with a number of riders. So whether you are fully covered or not, you need to observe that. And the most important point that Surya also brought in is, once you quit the job, because you want to pursue your passion, or you resign, or you retire, at that age, buying a health insurance can be very, very painful and very expensive, because one might be suffering from a disease. Buying a cover is very, very difficult at that age. So as I would say that the health insurance is something that should remain seamless. When you're born, you should be covered with the cover of your parents, and as soon as you mature, you become adult, you start your job, you buy your own insurance and continue it till the time you're alive. And today, the health insurance regulation says that health insurance will continue till you're alive. Nobody can cancel it midway, whether you are sick, you have had a number of claims, or you are 80 years or 90 years or 100 years.
And what about illness or disease? That can't be
Come what may, renewal is a right of every policy holder, regardless of whatever age, whatever health condition he is in. And so this is a benefit.
And there are no minimum number of years that you have to be insured for that to kick in?
Not at all. Once you enter the insurance fold, and provided that you continue to buy insurance in time, year on year, you will remain covered till you are alive. And that's guaranteed.
And what happens, Surya, when you want to, for instance, shop around for insurance? You already have an existing policy, but you feel that somebody's giving you perhaps better or wider coverage. What happens in a situation like that?
I think you need to shop around, like the way you shop around for other assets for you which you want to buy, and don't buy on day one. Same holds true for health insurance.
Right.
But don't only chase the premiums. That's what is actually happening in today's market. So what do people look around for? Which one is giving me a lower premium? Hence, I'll just go and buy that particular policy. That's not the right way to look at it. There are many features which you need to understand and then ascertain whether this new policy is going to offer me or not. Right, as Anurag mentioned, you to ensure that there is a renewability of the policy for every year till the age I'm alive. Then you have to look at the co-payment clause, whether I have to make some payment or whether the company will foot the complete bill. That's very, very important. Your claim settlement ratio, how much the company has been paying across board, that gives you a little bit of idea how strong the company is on the payment. These are the few factors. One more being, you can look at the coverage of your pre-existing diseases.
Okay.
How long they have been covering. Are they going to cover me right from day one, or is it going to get covered after a few years? So look at these points along with the premium before you decide which policy makes sense for me.
Right. Actually, that's a very important point. I mean, what if, for instance, person A has to have a surgery and decides to get a medical insurance cover right before that surgery? Is there going to be necessarily coverage for that kind of thing? Because there are clauses that affect situations like that.
Like Surya has mentioned, that there are very specific policies that deal with it. And very often, there are people who know that they've got a problem and they go and buy a policy. And then a month or two later, they present themselves in the hospital saying that, we need the surgery, and by the way, I've got an insurance policy. And when you look at the fine print clearly says that you have to give a cooling off period for 2 years or 1 year before certain types of surgeries can indeed happen. So there is a safeguard against that. And from an insurance regulatory point of view, from an insurance company point of view, they need to safeguard and cover these sort of risks because these are rampant, unfortunately.
But would you say that private healthcare costs are in fact rising alarmingly, and do private hospitals effectively expect people to already have insurance when they come to them?
Well, it's like this. If you look at a private hospital, a tertiary care hospital, the big hospitals that exist in the larger metros today, like Apollo, Fortis, Max, etc., about 30%, 35% of the people who actually come in are covered under some form of insurance. It could be a government scheme like CGHS, it could be ECHS for the armed forces, it could be an HDFC life cover or any other private company or corporate cover. But the balance, 65% of the people actually pay out of pocket.
Right.
And that is where the real problem lies. People don't mind, unfortunately, spending on perhaps holidays and some of the luxuries, but when it comes to thinking about a catastrophic health incident with themselves, nobody wants to think about it and therefore cover for it. And when that strikes you, it could be a cancer that's just come up, or it could be an accident that's happened on the road. It can be very, very expensive because that's the nature of healthcare delivery.
So there's a sort of ostrich-like approach to matters like healthcare or health insurance or life insurance or what have you. Would you agree?
Absolutely. So the very, very few people, as Daljit rightly pointed out, I mean, he's talking about 65% people, and I'm sure he's talking about the experience that he has in Fortis. But if you look at the government data available, out of a population of 1.3 billion, just barely 32 million have some kind of insurance, and CGHS and ECHS and the government schemes and the private healthcare insurance all combined together. That's a very, very minuscule percentage. And the government estimates again say about 70 million people in the country are pushed back into poverty trap because of the healthcare expenditure. And I think that's a very sad story because the government is...
How do you expect, I mean, you've already made the point that corporate insurance, when it's pegged at 2 or 3 lakhs per annum, is woefully inadequate when it comes to the healthcare costs that we're seeing nowadays. Modi Care, as we are calling it, the National Health Protection Scheme, is looking at a cover of 5 lakhs per family. And that's for 10 crore families, poor, which will be categorized as poor and vulnerable. How do you expect that to make a difference in the healthcare landscape as we see it? Daljit Singh, if you'd like to begin.
I think point number one, it's a pretty progressive step. the intent is absolutely right, and it's the first major step in providing universal health coverage, which really means that as a government, we take a responsibility for ensuring health coverage to our citizens. And therefore, the affordability aspect that we were talking about, which is a major issue in our country, gets really taken care of. Having said that, whilst the scheme has been announced, we are interested in understanding as to how the implementation will actually take place on the ground.
Yeah.
As I mentioned to you, that there are very few well-operating healthcare centers, either in the villages or very small towns. So when people fall sick, how will healthcare be delivered in a situation where infrastructure is woefully inadequate, in a situation where doctors and nurses are actually not available, in a situation where even the larger hospitals, particularly in the public sector district hospitals, have almost very, very basic levels of medical technology. So, and finally, I think from an insurance provider's point of view, that is there a control mechanism to ensure that the claims are actually being made honestly? Because that's another domain where there's a lot of leakage that can occur if your pipeline is not secure.
The fact that the government is considering almost universal health care or health cover, and that to pegging that at 5 lakhs per annum for families is actually also going to put some sort of pressure on the corporate sector to perhaps look at larger insurance premiums, larger insurance covers for their employees as well.
I think it's a question of mindset. As organizations start to believe that productive workforce and wellness is a prerequisite for that, you start not looking at only healthcare costs, but you start looking at the millions that you gain in productivity.
Right.
And once you have that well understood within the organization, you start differentiating between absenteeism and presenteeism. Absenteeism occurs because you don't show up at work because you're ill or stressed. Presenteeism is when you come to work but you're still stressed and you're not productive as a workforce. So you have on-site wellness schemes that organizations are considering now to actually unleash that potential and productivity.
There are a lot of people who look at health insurance also as a tax-saving device.
True.
But is there a need to look beyond it as just something that's going to get you a tax exemption? You know, when you advise people, how do you tell them to go about looking for what's best for them?
See, definitely tax saving adds a little bit of flavor to it.
Right.
But it should be looked at more as an incidental advantage you carry along with the basic need which you have.
Right.
Because the basic need, when it really happens to you, it can really change the gears. So health insurance is actually a form of wealth creation or wealth protection for you.
When a patient comes to a hospital, are they approached differently, or are they treated, not treated in terms of medical treatment, but in terms of the overall interaction that they're having with a private hospital? Is that at all different when you know that someone has medical insurance already?
No, it is not. I mean, I think when I look at the experience in our hospitals, there is no difference in the way that we treat patients or in terms of treatment protocols, in terms of what they're entitled to, what they're not entitled to. It is important for us to understand upfront, because this is a dialogue that needs to happen during the counseling stage, as to what's the mechanism of payment that the patient will make. Will it be cash? Are they covered under some form of government scheme or the corporate insurance scheme? And that, therefore, is factored in, because for some of these schemes, there are different rates that are applied because we've negotiated them with insurance companies.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
The second part is that every such insurance cover
But I
that's
think
actually
the worry
provided.
also, and I have to bring in sort of recent headlines which have screamed at us, saying, talking about the experience of a young couple who lost their daughter and got very inflated medical bills and so on, and a lot of questions were raised. So there are obviously caps on medical, on medicines and consumables within certain insurance policies and so on. So this is actually a slippery slope, for people who are getting insurance in the first place. Are they actually looking at the fine print of all of these things? How is it, how do they go about determining these factors? Because you might think that you have the maximum health insurance cover that you can possibly get.
So unfortunately, people don't go through the fine print. They don't look at these details, and that's precisely the point that Surya mentioned. Because a coverage of 3 lakhs and 5 lakhs per person, though it looks reasonable, is not okay in catastrophic situations. And that's really, those are the type of situations that create headlines.
Okay.
But the fact of the matter is that in such situations, it's life or death. And at that point in time, you bring in the best that medicine has to offer to save the person concerned. And those bills, unfortunately, do rise up quite significantly.
Anurag, would you like to add to that in any way?
So, I mean, I will say that, yeah, it's absolutely important for the people to understand what they're buying. But the lack of insurance awareness is very, very high in the industry. And I would go a little deeper as to why this happens. I mean, when I look at it, yes, I understand that people who are less literate, they are not aware about it, but significantly literate people are also not aware about it. And when I go back to it, I realized that when I was a school kid, I was never taught anything about financial management. I was never taught anything about risk management and insurance. Now, how do you bring that culture and how do you teach young people about how to manage them financially? People become engineers, people become doctors, people go into every profession, but financial management is a very, very important aspect of one's life, and that is something that we must teach to our kids. And unless they learn it, they won't realize what they are getting into and how to choose the right insurance, what to do and what not to do, what to understand. And it is important. While as an insurance company, I believe that we try to do our bit in educating the customer, and agents are supposed to be training, educating the customers as to what they're buying. But there will always be gaps.
Right.
And so it is important for the customer to be an aware customer to know what he is getting into.
All right.
I'd just like to add on to the point that he's very well articulated. The fact of the matter is that there is short-term thinking because there is no immediate payback on an insurance premium, insurance policy. So I can afford to defer it up because I'm young, I'm seemingly healthy, and it's something that happens to other people. Problems don't necessarily happen to me.
All right. I'm going to take last comments from Nishay and Surya as well. Anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Just be well. I would say it's very important that we pay attention to our overall well-being, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and financially, because ultimately you do have to pay your premiums to get an additional cover.
Right.
And keep an eye on health inflation. That's very critical for us because the way the health insurance costs are going up in India and will go for the next few years for sure is ranging between 15 to 20%. So please ensure that you increase your health insurance every few years to match up with the inflation, if not beat it.
All right, we've really heard a range of responses today from our panel of experts. We hope some of your questions on how to protect yourself from soaring medical bills have been answered in this last half hour. The big takeaways: don't neglect to pay your premiums. Make sure you have the right insurance cover for you. Don't always leave it up to your corporate employers or government employers for that matter to do it for you, and shop around and read the fine print very carefully. Thank you for joining us on Health Matters.